What do we do for those people who don't feel like they belong and who won't feel like they belong, where it's not a priority? When you talk about harmony, it makes me think of the things that don't scare me that may scare somebody else. But she taught me with saying what she loved about her community is listening to people in a community. They'll tell you what they love about it if you give them that chance. And if you just keep looking for the things that are wrong, like anywhere else in life, you'll find those wrong things.
Welcome back. This is another episode of the Take Care Podcast on the McKissick Health Podcast Network.
We may encounter many defeats, but we must not be defeated. That in fact, it may be necessary to encounter defeats so we can know who the hell we are. What can we overcome? What makes us stumble and fall and somehow miraculously rise and go on? I know that a diamond is a result of extreme pressure. Less time and less pressure, and it's just crystal or coal or fossilized leaves or just dirt. But time and pressure will create a diamond. It is considered one of the most beautiful elements, and it's one of the hardest elements on our planet.
Today, we have a great person to speak to. This is our first guest on the Take Care Podcast. I'm so excited. We've already talked about me trying to make her my best friend because I've read so many of her articles off of her blog, as well as watched some interviews. Yeah, we're taking it back because I'm really interested in hearing everything from the work that you're doing, even the framework that you created, the community framework. I want to hear it all. And you guys are going to benefit from this because we talk about living freely and what it means to be honest with ourselves and our experiences. And the author, the professional, the community psychologist that we have today, I think nails that in her book that she's going to tell you about today. So I want to introduce none other than the Dr. Tahira Mahdi. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. You're not supposed to make me tear up a little bit yet.
Oh my gosh.
That's for later.
You did. The more I read about your work and I listen to you speak, the more I'm like, oh, she nailed so much in this book.
Wow.
You really pointed out some pieces that we see every day and we live out every day, but we might not really zone in on or really put under the microscope. So I'm excited to hear you talk. We've already chatted before today and we were like, oh no, we are like seeing eye to eye here. So today I know will be a fruitful conversation for our listeners and I know we're going to enjoy it. And so we'd like to start with letting you introduce yourself to us in our community. Tell us about yourself.
All right. I'm Tahira Chloe Mahdi. I'm a community psychologist, a consultant, a fiction writer that also includes screenwriting. And that's pretty much how I would describe myself in a nutshell. And that's all I can think of right now. I'm sure the rest of it is going to come out, but a person who's doing her best, making the effort every day to live as freely as I can. And I'm just keep working toward it every day.
And that was definitely modest, but I love it because you got to that point that I love getting to where it's like, it's an everyday process and hearing like, yes, I'm a doctor. Yes, I'm a mother. I'm a partner, but I'm also just somebody trying to make it through every day the best I can. It's such a beautiful story that unfolds throughout our lifetime. And when we share it with other people, it brings us closer together, which you know all about. As a community psychologist. Can you tell us about your work?
Sure. So my dissertation research was on me trying to apply the theory of, it's like sense of community. There's an element called membership. Membership is defined as something you earn. You earn it and you work hard to get it so that you can know that you fit in, you have the right to fit into a group. So I wanted to apply that to the go-go music cultural community. And when I'm interviewing people from go-go musicians and people who have organizations related to go-go, what I found out during data analysis was that it didn't match up at all. So I'm at a point where I wanted to throw the computer out the window. I quit. I hate this program anyway, PhD ain't all that anyway. And then I was like, wait a minute, but all these people are saying the same thing. What is the same thing they're saying? And I didn't realize that would bring me to coming up with a whole new framework on how to look at community. So now 80% of my work now is consulting with nonprofit organizations, universities and colleges, people who work with communities. And before then, most of my work, and I still do this, but I teach this framework to different groups of professionals, more as in a professional development capacity, so that people who work with the people can apply this to the ways in which they work. And there's so many different ways in which it can apply, and how you can see the people you're working with and see yourself in relation to them.
Community is so complex. I think that's what we hear, but it's also simple. That sense of belonging is what you're kind of pointing out. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yes, of course. It's so simple. And the thing about getting a graduate degree is that they want you to take the simplest concept and break it down into parts, and you explain this and you define it and all that stuff. But it's really something simple. So when I ask people, I start off, define community or name communities that you belong to, and we see how people's answers are pretty much the same. It's just it's so everyday. Trying to explain it can feel idealized, and a lot of times, oh, people share this and they do this and they do that. But there are a lot of communities we belong to where everybody's not sharing things. We just kind of know we're part of the same community. Sure, we are, because we're grouped together, or I just know I'm one of you. But that's me and belonging have a tumultuous relationship. As a person, some people listening right now might feel like I do, where you don't always feel like you belong, even though I might know I'm in this community. Of course, I'm a part of it, but even a sense of belonging on planet Earth can sometimes feel like, what am I doing here among these people? Like, what's happening? And those kinds of feelings actually inspired my creative writing for the feature-length film that my husband and I wrote about what is it like to envision yourself possibly leaving the planet, going with some aliens somewhere. So, I mean, that's a very short version of it, but I love to have fun. As you get to know me, everything I do that's professional, I'm relating it to some crazy other fun thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, you're always, as your husband said, in your dedication or in your introduction for the book, you talk about your husband saying you were tapping in to something that was happening in the world somewhere.
Yes.
And I think that's true. That's very true. You don't always feel like you belong. I think, okay, so we can get into the first question that I have for you. So when we identify like whether communities are like living in harmony, that's kind of like a subjective interpretation that we gather. So what would you say indicates like whether or not a community is living in harmony or there's a disruption? What kind of leads people to feel like they belong or shows that a community hasn't kind of nailed where people fit in?
I think some people are always going to feel like they do, but I notice there are some people who make that effort to bring community together. So in all the neighborhoods I've lived in, except for maybe one or two, I joined the neighborhood association right off. Like, let me see what's going on here. Who are the people who are getting together to do things? Even on the college campus, I went to undergrad and graduate school at the same university, UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and I got involved. So even if I felt like I didn't always belong, and even in grad school, because I was older than a lot of the other students, but I still was involved. I still felt like I was part of a community, but belonging isn't a priority for me. It's almost like learning that early on in life. I'm not like everybody else. If I'm in high school, maybe my clothes aren't like everybody else's, or I feel like a nerd and everybody else is cool or something like that, where I'm just like, I remember specifically in ninth grade, feeling alone and feeling lonely. And I made up my mind, like, I'm never going to feel like this again. There's always going to be people around. I'm always going to feel uniquely me. So I don't have to worry about that. And there are certain little times in my life at events or something like that where I feel like, oh, I belong. Oh, this is a good feeling. And then when I'm not with that group of people, when I'm not in that space, I can just go along, but just kind of getting used to that. So what I want to explore now, as far as consulting and giving presentations about or helping people to explore, is what do we do for those people who don't feel like they belong and who won't feel like they belong, where it's not a priority? Because people now make it seem like, oh, the only way, like when I was in grad school, the only way to make me finish a PhD program was to make me feel like I belong so that I could do this. I was like, no, that's not the way. I could tell you how you could make me feel like I belong, but you're so intent on, you must belong here with us. That wasn't what I needed. But so what can we do for people like that? That's what I want to explore next.
Oh my gosh, I love that. What do we do with people who feel like they don't belong? And how do we stop this urge to like make them fit?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I think this is a perfect segue into talking about the book. Your book, your incredible book, nonfiction piece of work, or a fiction piece of work. It is incredible, y'all. And I say nonfiction because it almost feels like it is nonfiction.
It was written to feel like this is real. So you can go, is this real? And that's what I wanted people to think the whole time.
Exactly. And that's what you feel while you're reading it. You're like, oh, I know that girl.
Right.
Or you like, that's the dude I'm not going back to. We're not even going to think about him because we don't want to open up a door. Nope. Yeah. But this is not how it was supposed to go. Y'all, you got to grab a copy. You can get a copy at the One Choice Magazine bookshop and support independent owned bookstores. Yep. We added it to our fiction roster. Yes. We are in love with this book. So in talking about that, people who feel like they don't belong, your book is filled with them. It's an entire community of people who kind of don't necessarily belong to any specific identity, but somehow find a way to coexist. Right. What was your thought process behind like creating this world for us to engage in?
Oh, so glad you asked. So this main character, Roshan, is 32. And she just graduated from college and she doesn't have a job. So she has to move back in with her mother, which is already like, and I've been there like 3 different times in my life. I had to move back home. So I'm reminding myself of what it felt like. I was already living with my mother when I graduated from college and didn't get into graduate school. So I was already like, dang, I thought this was it. I thought I was on my way and I'm not. And I was devastated. I was depressed that whole summer. But now that I look back on it and me wanting to choose another way to show my dissertation to the world instead of writing a nonfiction book, I said, well, can I make it in fiction? And when I look back on my life. And I said, well, maybe I can do it about mental health and how communities coming together can support people's mental health. Roshan developed out of me remembering that I was depressed that summer, but all I remember now that PhD has gotten, that was years ago, it's all fine now, but now I remember all the fun I had and how my community through cookouts, and I'm calling it my community, my neighborhood. It was people I grew up with. I lived with my mom. He lived with his mom. He lived with his mom. And guess what? We had each other and we hung out and we didn't make each other feel bad. None of us were in therapy, but every now and then somebody would get paid from an odd job and they'd go to the store and buy a bottle of Burnett's vodka and go down to the so-and-so's backyard. Somebody got an accident settlement and bought a bushel of crabs for everybody. I mean, it was just like so many things like that sound so hood-like and oh my gosh, it's alcohol, but it's like, no, they got me through. So it's really, when I look at it, a love song to Forest Heights, Maryland, which is where I was living at when all this happened, and how they got me through. They don't even know they did, but they did.
Yes, and a love song. I love that, because that's why I wanted to point out the part about harmony and what harmony looks like in community. Because at first glance, especially as like a professional within the field of like healthcare or any kind of services-based thing where you're supposed to identify factors that negatively impact somebody, right?
Yes.
You would see the community, the world that you built, and you'd be like, oh, this is like an at-risk community. We have people who or abusing alcohol. Like there's depression, so mental illness is prevalent throughout the story. You have these mother-daughter dynamics, which are toxic for some people. You get what they would label promiscuity, but also just like this exploration of sexuality and self-power, all throughout this book. And so at first glance, you'd be like, these people aren't in harmony, like they need to be saved. And then you realize they're saving each other.
Right.
And this is a form of harmony. So what does it mean when you look at communities and you have to go in and do your work and you say like, no, there's good stuff here that you might not identify at first glance, but it needs to be here because people are being helped by it.
Definitely. First, I have to thank you for saying that. This book has been out for a year, and just, I know, people like it and stuff, but you getting it on my intellectual level and how it broke it down means the world to me. I have to acknowledge that. Thank you. And to answer your question, I learned from when I was still in the PhD program, and I'm working in Baltimore, and there was a woman named Denise Johnson, and she works in I don't know if she's in Druid Heights. It could be Upton, but it's like the Penn North area in Baltimore, which is kind of infamous for being at risk, like how you were talking about. And people can drive through different neighborhoods and all they see is, oh my gosh, there's all these people outside, or how much stuff is going on, and people want to live far from the city. But we were talking once, and she talked about living in that neighborhood, because she said, I love the hustle and bustle of it all. And I'm like, wow, see, she lives in this neighborhood. She's doing stuff for her community. She loves the hustle and bustle of it. There's nothing scary about that to her. She's like, hey, people outside, we in the street, And when I was moved to another neighborhood, shortly after, once I finally got in grad school, the first house I bought, there were some guys on the corner, and the man who came to do work on my house was like, oh man, I'm sorry you lived in this kind of neighborhood. There's guys over there on the corner. But the guys reminded me of the guys who got me through my summer, who I was hanging out with. I was like, I ain't scared of them. Like, hey, y'all, beep, beep. When I pass by, if I blast my music riding through the neighborhood and they see me, it's like, hey, so it's a certain fear that we don't have. So that's when you talk about harmony, it makes me think of the things that don't scare me that may scare somebody else. But she taught me with saying what she loved about her community is listening to people in a community. They'll tell you what they love about it if you give them that chance. And if you just keep looking for the things that are wrong, like anywhere else in life, you'll find those wrong things.
Yeah. And I'll gas you up all day long for your literary skills and like embedding your academic scholarship within this text, because you do it flawlessly. Like I had to read it twice. I've been reading like for the last, I want to say like year and a half, I've been trying to go through fiction, because when you're in higher education, you don't have time, right?
Nope.
And then when you do have time, it's not the first thing you go for. Like I grab an article in my discipline or something that's interdisciplinary to kind of sharpen my skill set or whatever. But for the past year or so, I've been trying to read fiction. So I'm like going through it. I'm like, all of these books, I'm on Goodreads now. And I'm like, I got to get all of this goodness, Right. And so when I read it the first time, I sat back because of the ending, which I will not ruin. But I sat back and I was like, God dang it. Like, this is not how I thought this was going. And then I read it again and I'm like, yeah, that's what I felt throughout reading it, was this sense of there is safety in what is familiar to us. And sometimes when we encounter things that are unfamiliar, we deem it violent or unsafe. Instead of recognizing just the difference, right? And sitting with that and allowing for it to be meaningful to somebody else, even if it's not to us. They say that don't yuck my yum kind of thing. And that's what I feel like we do in community a lot, because the first thing I saw when she goes back home, the main character, Roshan, when she goes back home, she encounters her best friend's brother, Kai, and Junior. And they immediately take on this protective role. But when you talk about the boys who lived up at the corner and not being a threat or a danger to you, I'm like, there's still something that we haven't always been able to name, but is always operative within communities of color, where it's like, to look out. And I think you get that in the book where these men in a group, because it's like 7 of them, I feel like it's close to.
Right.
It's Junior and it's Kai, and then it's Dinko, and it's
right.
all of them, right? Hanging out together. But they provide like this sort of I don't want to say vacuum, but it's like a fence, it's a perimeter that kind of safeguards her as she's going through this crazy journey back to herself, or like establishing a new version of herself. What was your thought in like creating these relationships between the characters?
Just trying to be authentic with it and trying to make it something where you wonder, is this real? And a lot of each one of these characters reminds me of somebody. It's not a direct, this person is this person, but I can take qualities from somebody, like mainly things that I like. I like that this person is a jokester. I like that this person cooks all the time. I like that this person really fancies himself a businessman, even though he's just one of the guys. You know, it's like certain things like that I wanted to put in there just so they can feel authentic. And honestly, writing it, I didn't have to. Well, the main thing I did to keep it authentic or whatever was listen to Roshan's voice and let her voice come through without judging her, because that was very easy to do when she meets the character Bradford, for example. And I was like, can't write no stuff like this. They're going to get me. And I'm thinking, what will people say? Like, what kind of person does that make me to write about this? And I could feel that zone. You know how you get in that creative zone and you going, I could feel it slipping away. And I was like, what would I write if nobody's looking over my shoulder, if I'm just going for it? And that's how the book took off and went on its own life.
Ooh, you hit the nail on the head with Bradford. And I do get, Bradford.
That's me and Bradford. It's like, I know he looks good and he's the sexy guy, but Bradford, what are you doing?
I mean, at no point did I turn the page and I'm like, I don't want to go. I want to take Bradford outside and go round for round. Just like, I'm mad at him. But then for a second, like, you get it. Because like, as a young girl, it's different. It's different. You're seeing an older man and you're like, oh, like, this is a possibility. Like, you like the idea of it. And I felt like a lot of the time when you think about Roshan and Bradford being like this police officer who kind of saves her, you know, in this scene that we won't talk too much about, he kind of there's an element of like, she was nervous, she was scared. Their first encounter.
Yeah, she was nervous and scared, but I felt like because she got used to being in school, trying to dispel the stereotypes about her family. She's a teacher's pet. She's an overachiever. She knows what does this authority figure need from me? And what can I give to this person so that they will see me as a victim and then take care of me? That's what I got from it. I was like, oh, you're good. Because I know she was scared. But then for me, it turned into, I was like, were you just, it was those crocodile tears, you know, so you could just start reeling him in. Because, you know, but it's all interpretation.
It is, but wait a minute. Don't do this, because you just gave us another lens to look at this whole relationship. Like, if she was playing a game as well, more strategic than she was vulnerable. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, but see, I don't know. And I was discussing, it was with a friend of mine, Cato Hammond, who was one of the first readers of the book, who gave me feedback and what he thought. And he and I argue about the characters. Like, he know I wrote it and everything. And he's like, no, because this person, this, and he has like opinions. So I love that when somebody saw a character in a totally different way based on their experiences. So if you saw her as she's vulnerable, he kind of saved her in a way, that's a legitimate way, because the art is there. Here's the story. And you can see it that way. But what does that mean? You think about her going along, you know.
Definitely. And I think, you just ruined me, because I know, and this is why it pays to be self-aware. Because as soon as you say that, like, why did you peg her that way? I'm like, because I did therapy with 19-year-olds. I worked in a therapeutic setting in college, and I'm like, at 19, they do not have the level of
They don't.
discerning, like you just don't have it. All of the things, executive functioning, good decision making. 19 is out of there, and so I immediately assumed like, oh, you can see like the series of not poor choices, but like the curiosity that led you into a rabbit hole that got you into this situation, and so I assumed she wasn't ready. Like she wouldn't know how to respond. But then taking into context her background, she absolutely knows how to respond. She knows how to survive. And that's the number one response that she needs, which makes that whole encounter more strategic than it is vulnerable.
Right. It's
so strategic. I can see both sides. Yeah.
Right. Because it's almost like at that age, it's two sides of the same coin. So now that I have two sons, 18 and 20, if I thought they were dealing with some older woman, I would be livid. Or thinking back to when I was that age, though, that was certain women had an older guy somewhere, stashed somewhere. It wasn't like their main boyfriend, but they had some older dude stashed somewhere. And that was normal for us. So it's just all in the way you look at it. And if you're looking at it as a health professional, you're going to see it that way. And now you're making me look at her like, yeah, but she was just a baby. She just vulnerable. She didn't know, So we had these discussions. Okay, now I can see it that way.
Yeah, I won't argue with you about your character because I don't want people arguing with me about mine.
Yeah, at least you're not going to argue, but at least we can see each other's point. Because I can totally see your point.
Yeah. I mean, as soon as you said it, I'm like, you're right. Because you wouldn't try to find him. Like you wouldn't have stayed on him so hard if you were literally afraid of the outcome of being in a part of his life and him being a part of your life, right? Because she knew your family's history. She knew the secrecy that she was obligated to keep, which gets into a whole nother part of the storyline when we talk about family secrets and how family dynamics interact with our personal lives and our choices. Because you did talk about it. She's trying to resist this identity that her mom has told her is inappropriate, like is not her expectation for her. So Roshan has this relationship with her mother, Marshawn, which is so cute that the names were so close. I had to keep rereading lines to make sure I was thinking of the right one. Yeah, especially when it came to Junior. No spoilers there. But that mother-daughter relationship, what made you think as you were writing and these characters were speaking to you? Because I love how you say like you allow space for the characters to be who they are, right? And that to be a judgment-free zone. So as you were writing and these characters began to like take shape, how did you land on this mother-daughter dynamic? And why did you think it was a necessary story to tell or include in the parts? Because I'm sure there were parts that you thought of that you didn't include. So what made this storyline so powerful? Because it's subtle, but it's powerful. Like once you hit it in that latter end of the book, like it hits home. So
yeah. I guess I'm wondering what that looks like. And I noticed in chapter 1, we got her stepfather out of the way, like real quick. So it had to be just these two women living in the house, adult women, but there's a mother and there is a child. That's her only child. So as I'm writing this, wondering what's going on with her summer, and my husband is one who encouraged me to find a backstory. Well, include something about their backstory, and that would extend the book because I thought it was going to be pretty short. And that's when I said, well, what was it like to raise Roshan? Because we've already seen some stuff about her. How can I bring the audience into who she is so they're just not like, oh, she's a hoe, she's, whatever. And me kind of like asking Marshawn, what was it like to raise her? And then we get Marshawn like, well, let me tell you what this was like when she was 14 and then when she went to college and what I had to deal with. So as a parent now, and that's the other thing, I think it wouldn't have come out so much if I hadn't become a parent to teenagers. And I got my sons when they were preteens. So just as they're coming into teenage years, my outlook on life is just completely different. So that's what made me want to know, what was it like raising this child?
I love that you get both sides of those stories, because sometimes you just stay stuck in a child's view. And then sometimes as the parent, you forget what it was like to be a child. I think the older we get and the less we kind of engage with the parts of us that we kind of leave behind as we age.
Right.
We don't remember what it was like. And so it's interesting, even though Marshawn is in her 50s, right?
Yes.
Okay, she's in her 50s. Parts of her life are still like that innocence of youth, right? And I wonder if it was because her romantic relationships that she's pursuing, but also her playfulness. Like you hear it when Junior is bringing her the beer, right?
Right.
And she's like flirty. Or just her way of speaking back and forth with Roshan, you kind of hear the youthfulness or the innocence, I like to say, because parts of you don't lose parts of you, right? As you get older, you can hide some of them, right? Or you can put them off to the side, but they're still there somewhere. And so you can see some of that in her interaction with her. But there's one line, and I'm going to stop so I can scroll and find it, where you talk about it's a good one. It's a good one. This one was one of the ones. Here it is. I'm gonna read it because I'm gonna paraphrase it. Okay. My mother always knows when I'm mentally unwell. There are the times she reminds me of the generations of Black women who had no choices and no depression because their children still had to eat, regardless of how low their moods were.
I get that from my mom, and I have a great relationship with my mother. And there's been times, I think now she's had to learn, I guess, as we learn our children as they grow up, and you say, this is how this child is. But she always reminded me, if I was like, I'm depressed, I'm whatever, she would get into, because she used to go to the country in North Carolina. She knows what it's like to pick tobacco with her cousins or to do, certain things. And she's like, well, suppose you had to go to the outhouse and walk through the grass to get there and the snakes in the grass or whatever. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Mom. So she knows how to tell a story that, suppose you had to take in washing and you can't go to sleep, then you can go in your room and lay down right now. Suppose you had washing to finish and this for somebody else's household because you need that money to bring. I'm like, okay, like I'm not complaining no more. But I didn't know that was in so many other families, how Black women were told, like, chin up, like we ain't got time for that. Your grandmother ain't had time for that. I ain't got time for that right now. I'm working right now to put, so it's okay, fine. So there's a bit of a privilege of and I hate to do it because it's not like dispelling other people's, the depression and the pain. I got my own mental health issues, but there are days when I'm going to allow myself to rest. I'm going to pray. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to read my Bible like my grandmother taught me to do. And then I got to keep going. So, and I'm still, some of us are in just different privileged positions and different circumstances. And some of us are working to get there. Like, I can't wait to get to a point where I can work for myself. I can make my own schedule and I ain't got to worry about that. And I'm finally at that point in my life, and just know I've been waiting so many years to get here, but I have to acknowledge daily, remember when you wanted to work for yourself and make your own schedule, this is what that looks like, but that still means you got to hustle to get that next contract or sell some more books or whatever that looks like.
Yes, and we're here. We see eye to eye on that, consulting and trying to work it out with the vision of your life. You're constantly recreating, right? You're kind of re-envisioning in an ongoing process. What do I want my life to look like, and how do I make it work? Yes. And I think in another interview you said people who are like, you like writing about people who are messing up and composed on the outside. Yeah. And I see that in that quote, absolutely, because the keep going is because, like, we know some things are going to be messed up, but we got to keep going. But there's also this need to sit with where we are right now, right? To acknowledge I am depressed. I am disappointed. I am frustrated, which both Roshan and Marshawn were. Yeah. Throughout their life, they were both what I would call, I think Marshawn might not have had the language to say she was depressed, but I can't imagine like losing a loved one the way she did. And
right. Or two at the same time.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
and then having to keep on. Oh,
and having to keep on. But Marshawn is from the keep on generation. So that's, first of all, some of that is generational. And then, Roshan is not from that. Roshan is Gen X also. So it's something about that generation that kind of, I guess why they call it X. Like, they don't even have that many stuff about us on the internet. When we see memes, it's really about our music or something. And then it goes on to people who learn how to talk about mental health, talk about what it means to rest. And those are the millennials who have kind of shown the rest of us, no, sit down somewhere. That's what I learned from millennials. Like, yeah, y'all not getting up and work until 2 a.m. and you get up and do it the next day. No, y'all was like, no, I went to sleep. So I love that. And I love exploring just that different generational ways that we look at that.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I'm glad you mentioned that Gen X is usually pegged for the music, the cultural contributions that your generation, like that generation made, but silenced at the same time. Like, you've never heard, I don't think I can pinpoint a generation that was louder, but also quiet at the same time. Like, the personal identity of Gen X is so muted, is the best way I can picture it, because you are shifting in, like, what is my career? What do I really want versus what the boomers or everybody before me has told me I need to want and I need to have. Like, everything from that, you don't have no kids, you need to get you a house, you don't expect a man to take care of you, which Roshan was really toying with. She's like, well, I do want to stand on my own, but I also like being cared for, which is what we kind of see with Silas. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's nothing wrong with wanting to be cared for.
Right.
Like, in the way that you're choosing and not just being given. And you see that with her and Silas and her mom and even her and Junior, because there's times where Junior's like ignoring her when she thinks like he's gonna be her hookup partner. And then he goes to ignoring her in the way she wants to be acknowledged. And she's like, well, come pay attention to me. Give me a drink,
Right. Yeah. She can't stand not being, who's not taking care of me. And I feel like sometimes she's in the situation in this certain men that she's like, no, you're here to take care of me, right? Okay, and she can still, once she gets what she needs, okay, and then she's on giving her attention to somebody else. So it's still like this kind of butterfly going around, like she can act like she's chilling, even though we know she already told us she was depressed as this summer is unfolding. So that looking to get a certain way on the outside and choosing how to act in certain ways, but what is she really feeling and going through that's making her behave in this way, where she's needing this attention like that?
And since you speak with the character more regularly than we do, it's a great time to ask, like, what do you think Roshan wants? What do you think is driving her?
I think she wants power and wants independence, but just like in her own way, because one of the things I wanted to explore is what is that like when you grow up with a parent who is sheltering you? Marshawn sheltered her, like, I'm going to put you on this path. You're not going to go the way the family did. You go to school, you're not going to parties. I shape your life. Well, as soon as she's out of Marshawn's sight, she's off to the races. Okay, how am I going to lose my virginity is now that's number one on her mind. So it's really about finding her freedom and finding her own way. And that's what I think it is. She wants the independence, she wants the power, but at the same time, she did go through, well, can't some man take care of me? Like, these men got money. All right, put me in a house. I can still do what I want to do, and you're gonna pay for it, right? Okay, let's see how we can make that happen.
Yeah, and we see that back and forth even happening now, where there's all the social media post about, like, is this what we fought for? Is this what the women's suffrage movement was for us to get up and go to work? Like, we want to be saved. And it's like, there's a balance that you have to achieve. And you see her working through that throughout the novel, like trying to figure out, okay, what is me being independent and having power, but what is sustainability going to look like for me? Like, how do I get stable in my own right. And so she's going to find a job, and you see her kind of using those skills that she knows is there. Like, I think that's what I can really appreciate about her, aside from all the crazy, like, because girl, you just need to sit down, just buckle up, just lock yourself in your room. At a couple points, like with Dinko, and I'm like, girl, you trying to be on blood pressure medicine this year. That's all I can tell.
Yes.
But there's also like this innate knowing of, I have something to offer. And whether it's like building out the project that she was working on, or just the also perseverance, right? Like, to persevere is also to know that there's something in you that you have to give. And you see her continuing to do that even through the mess.
Yeah, even through the mess, because she still has to hold it together for her mom. And I think another thing is she said, I can't look lazy like to my mom, because my mom is very much, oh, this is what the women had to go through. So she at least wants to keep up the appearances. I'm doing work. I have a job. Look at what I'm doing. She at least has that much sense, is what I call it. She got sense enough to not be living in somebody's house and not doing nothing all day. She's like, I'm a cook. I'm gonna look like I'm on a computer. I'm gonna do something so I won't be viewed as lazy. And that's another drive for her, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I thought that was a funny point about the getting up to cook, and then making sure, like, when she came in, she was working on her computer. I'm like, dang, we really do be trying to throw distractions.
I mean, hey, because it's all about appearances. And I was explaining that to my son, and I was laughing about that to my husband. I work from home, but it's certain things, and it's so funny, but I can say that to him. I'm like, it's like when you come in, I might be at the sink, I'm washing dishes, like, hey, or I'm up here in the office, like, you don't know what I was doing an hour before you came in. Like, I could have just been sitting back, but it's something that means you left the house to go to work, and you come home, whoever life you're supporting, you would like to know that that person is doing something. So yeah, universal.
Yeah, definitely universal, because I work from home too. And it's funny because even when you're doing some of those like simple tasks, like washing dishes or doing laundry or cooking dinner or whatever you're doing, you're also thinking, like, your brain is still active, even if you aren't like writing out articles or whatever you're working on at the time, or contacting people. Like, your brain is still giving you little notes here and there.
It's whole conversations up here. It's whole lists being made. You're like, okay, now once I finish this, when I get back, I'm gonna do such and such. You're planning who I'm gonna introduce to who. It's work. You're still working. You're just not doing the task, but you're planning. So
this one lady referred to it as the narrator, and I'm like, yo, like, I got a few narrators up there, and they're always busy, always busy. Like, I'd be like, shut up. Like, even after I read your book, for the next week, I was still thinking through it, because like, it's been, I think, like 3 weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks since I've read the book. And I was like, I'm still thinking about it. Like, it just comes up.
That's awesome.
Like, wow. So I have all of these thoughts about it because I've been thinking about it nonstop.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's great when writing sticks. And sometimes we think like, and that's what I want to go back to. So we talk about this need for, because your research, I'm gonna pause, your research is based on qualitative data, right? You really enjoy stories and hearing things in context. And so I think what's so powerful about your writing is that it brings to the forefront so many stories at one time, and we don't feel like we didn't get it enough. You feel like you know these characters enough that they do remain in your mind even after you finish reading it. As much as I would love to square up with Bradford, like, I hear him in the back of my head, like, there had to be something going on with this man for him to have these relationships and this secrecy and these issues, that he couldn't. And then you had to go get a very young,
right? Because it was like, and I was trying not saying stereotype men, but I didn't have to. All I had to do was listen to the story. This is what happened. And then there's certain other times in there where I liked what he did. So it was like certain behaviors that he did. And I was like, I don't know, I kind of like that. And I could kind of laugh it off. And I'm like, no, we don't like Bradford. I had to remind myself, but putting myself in her shoes, I'm like, I would have been probably the same way. I can't lie, with Bradford. But at my age now, like, no, Bradford, he's a bad guy.
I know it sucks when your older self is telling your younger self, like, girl, you know we shouldn't. And you're like, but we should.
Yeah.
I mean, if you getting treated like that, like no shit. Bradford, he might have had a couple things going on for him here from what the pages say. But just the age and the police officer, that's what really got me. I'm like, yo, not police officer, pick anybody else. Roshan, this is not compatible with anything you've got going on here.
Right. But what she's 19, like you said, it's something about that brain. And you know, people used to say stuff like, oh, so-and-so's young and dumb, and they would say it in a way that's like kind of shaming somebody for being young and dumb. But getting to a certain age, it's like almost like enjoy this time being young and dumb. Like you ain't gotta think about nothing. You ain't thinking about nothing else. Just okay, you'll learn eventually. And I had to learn to come to that point, which is what I wanted when I was earlier. So my first book, God Laughs Too, is about a 21-year-old. And that's all I wanted at that time, was for some older generation women to understand, I'm going to be young and dumb. Let me be young and dumb. Let me have my own relationship with God and figure out what that looks like for me as I figure my life out. That's all I need. And support me as I do that, and let me know what you've been through also. So this book was more like a freeing up of just having a messy story and acknowledging messy people and how they still were there for one another anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you definitely get that. You definitely get that out of this book. Awesome. I want you to talk about some of the differences between academic writing and creative writing. And I want you to talk about it because it would have been easy for somebody to read like a qualitative study where some of these same issues were lifted up, and you kind of hear the story of this woman's difficulty finding employment and stuff like that. And then we would quickly see data be thrown up right next to it to show the unemployment rate for people in this age group, how many college graduates struggle to find employment, postgraduate. Like we know how this looks. It's in a more quantitative format. So what is the reason that you knew this story had to be told from a creative writing perspective?
It's so funny that you bring that up. So the working title for this book was called Statistics of Unemployed College Grads, something like that, where I was going to start each chapter with a statistic. Like, this is how many people are unemployed after college. This is how many people from this age to this age are living with their parents right now. And it was going to be that way. And then I started having too much. By the end of chapter 2, I was like, oh, this is not that kind of book. That was what that was. Yeah, she had pivoted from junior to Dinko. So I was like, wait a minute, she is this kind of person. This is going to be this kind of book. So I took all that away. And that was writing the blog DC Brand 99 was my counterpart when I'm learning academic writing. This is my thesis. This is my dissertation research. These are my articles. And knowing it had to be in such a structure, but I had this freedom I was like, I'm a writer. I have a blog just so I can empty my brain and do what I wanted to do. And then I have to come back to this new language that I'm learning, which is academic writing, which didn't feel natural. So even my topics, like my master's thesis topic was about nerds and how we stereotype nerds, and doing a study about, does visual acuity match up with certain characteristics, just other stuff that I had to make fun for myself. And even my committee was like, well, this was a fun read, and I was like, aha, I got them. So I'm worried about entertaining my committee instead of this is doing good research. I mean, it was good research. I had to make it concise so they'd look at me as an intelligent individual. My committee was all Jewish men. So it was just funny who were my mentors and who were awesome. But it was so great to be like, okay, I need them as my committee to see me as intelligent, to agree I should have a master's degree, and also to be entertained by my writing. So that was my first inkling of, oh, I can combine these two, and I just had to keep moving toward combining all aspects of myself to be me and write what I want to write. So that's how that book came to be. Like, I could do fiction. I know how to do stuff and entertain people with my research. Let me see what I can do with it. That's how it came about.
And you nailed it. I mean, I remember that same experience of being in grad school and you having to write, because I did a graduate degree in religion. So, you know, like the
Wow.
tiniest violin of dry writing possible.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So my undergraduate degree is in psychology and education.
Okay.
And then my both masters are in religion.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's been a road. Road,
Okay.
but also like learning how to not divide yourself, which is what I'd love for you to talk about next, because we talk about living freely on the podcast. And so being able to kind of consolidate all of these identities and allow them to just coexist, rather than say like, no, here's when I have to be an academic and here's when I could be a novelist. I'm gonna merge the two, you know, and people don't know it's possible.
Right.
Oftentimes we're told we cannot. So it's great when you meet people who are doing it and doing it boldly, which is why I was like, yes, we're getting on the podcast to talk about this book, because you did it so beautifully. And it's so subtle. Like you would almost miss it if you didn't know, like, this is our real lived experience, right? And that's what you point out and remind us of. It's like, no, these are our stories and they need to be told. And this is what they're telling us at the same time.
It just means so much to me that you get it, because even though I was determined to do it, there was still that fear. You know, once I read back through the book, once I'm holding it in my hands and like, oh, this is my book, I'm thinking about the naughty scenes in it. And like, oh, if my academic people read this, like, what are they going to think about me? And fortunately, one of my best academic colleagues and friends is Dr. Lawrence Brown. So he's a public health person and consults to like governments and agencies and stuff like that. And he's written nonfiction books and stuff, but he got it. And he's discussing with me the men in the book and stuff. And I was like, okay, so people do get it. They're not looking at me bad, but so it's still in the back of my mind, like, what will they think? But I just put up like a banner on LinkedIn advertising it. And I just started maybe a month ago putting it on LinkedIn. Like, you know what? I wrote a book. If you either want to read it or you're not, I don't care what you think at all. And it has to come from the I don't care. It can't, you know, I'm not so, I'm so boldly, confidently going into, no, I just decided I don't care. Guess what? I wrote a book I think is good. I would love to make money from it too. And, you know, and discuss it. Cause like this discussion now it's showing me I'm on the path to, I would love to tour the country and discuss it with different groups of people. And like I did with my first book, I was able to go on a book tour, and that was just such a rich experience. And that was over 20 years ago. So it's just sometimes merging the selves, it is difficult, and people are always going to have something to say. So if I realize whatever I do, people are always going to have something to say, I need to say, I don't care. Just like writing the book itself. I don't care what they're going to think. I pretend they're not looking over my shoulder. Let me envision people just saying, congratulations, where can I get a copy? Or, you know, just whatever it is, I just got to let it go, because I can't, it's too much work to try to be those different people. And I did realize when I was in school, I had 2 acting experiences when I was in the middle of grad school. So, and people are looking at me like I'm crazy. And I was like, oh, I was on set this weekend doing such and such. And they're just like, that's not academic, you know, and it just made me feel good. I don't belong with you anyway. I don't feel like I belong in your group. I may as well lean into not belonging and just do whatever I want to do. It's the point. I want to do what I want to do. And that's why.
That's it. And I love that you circle back to that point about belonging. Like you have to not care. There is an element of okay, so when we look at development, there's a section within, I think it's like 13, 14, 15, where a child starts to separate their identity from their parents' identity, because up until that time they've tried to like the same things and do the same things, and then there's like this division, and you see the child start to identify as a self instead of your child, right? And I think some of us forget that you have to constantly re-engage that activity, because every time you become a part of something, whether it's attending a school or being a part of a team at work, you know, you tend to shape your identity around what you're doing instead of who you're being. And I think that's beautiful that we see Roshan say, okay, I'm in this group, and I can like navigate it, like from trying to clap back at Junior's mom to being out with Dinko and smoking weed. You like, she's doing it all, literally. And it's not like she feels like she's taking off one face and putting on another one to do it.
Right. It's all about wherever she is looking like she's okay, or just proving to everybody she's okay and she can do it. And I'm just glad you got that.
Oh yeah. I'm telling you, we see eye to eye on this one, because we even talked about, and I'm still sketching that out. I'm not letting it go. I would love, as you go on tour, to sort of write like a workbook for people to think through some of these things in here, because it's so prevalent throughout the book. It would be a great tool, I'm thinking, for high school students, you know, in a English literature class, combined with like a health perspective. It's good. This is good work. And it's one of those on the nose, only because like you're like, what age group? Like I cracked up when I read your acknowledgments and you said to your sons, I hope you read this when you're 35.
I cannot imagine them reading this book. I really can't.
When I read that, I was like, dang, I shouldn't have read this till next year.
Because for everybody else, it's fine. But my sons and my goddaughter, I'm like, oh my gosh, they cannot read this. Anybody else is 18 and up person, I'm like, hey, let's talk. But you said high school. And I'm like, if you think they can handle that, I just don't know about.
Ma'am. Yes, they can. And I will say, yes, they can, because we have kids in middle school who are trying to live out these narratives, right? So you get a middle school kid who's trying to talk to a 30-year-old, right? And I know, but it's happening, and they believe they should be able to. That's why I'm like, when she was 19, there was no way I was believing a 19-year-old was gonna be like that thoughtful about this process. But then when I think about it, taking into account her history, like she didn't come from a family where she could be dumb. Right. It's about safety. You know, she would have needed to know how to kind of shapeshift based off of her environment. So no, that changed everything for me. But absolutely, I think high schoolers could definitely benefit from reading that, because they're already living it. You know, and as much as we would like to believe, Marshawn believes she was safeguarding her the entire time. And safety only exists in proximity of you, you know, when they're not in front of you, you can't keep them safe. And I think that was one of the parts that was most tragic to me about the college experience, was because she was unsafe. Like even her experience with the instructor, you know, and you like, man, like what?
It's just, and I'm thinking about men. So I do have all these male friends who were reflected in the book, just listening to men my whole life, a bunch of male cousins and everything. And you know how, again, now at my age, I can look back and go, well, that's not right because such and such and such. But growing up hearing it, they're about, is this legal? Okay, fine. I can do this then. And that's how I'm thinking about how much we had to fight as women who had to fight to make the age of consent 18. Like, you know what I'm saying? Everybody's like, okay, at least let the girls get out of high school before you all over them, and had to set a bar, and men are staring at that bar like, okay, cool. Now we're good. And I cringe and just at this age, but back then it was like, yeah, I'm legal. I'm an adult now. So what does that look like?
Yeah, it was appropriate. Well, culturally understood that it was okay, right? Because it's like when a young girl's body was starting to change at like 16, right? Her hips would expand, or her boobs would increase in size. And so men were like, oh, you getting your grown woman weight, right? And it's like, she's still 16. It's a problem here. But the idea that I hope we can move to from a public health perspective, but also just like a human perspective, is instilling like the skills and the ethics within each person, so that they understand like, this is safe for me, this isn't safe for me, and allow them to make that decision from that space. Because I think if if I could tell Roshan anything, it would be like, you're searching for something
Mm-hmm.
and you're looking for it, believing that everybody you meet is offering that, and that's not necessarily what they're offering.
Right.
And when you look at Bradford, he seems like he's offering connection, he's offering space, because he affirms her body size and her abilities, right? In all of these ways that she's being appreciated for who she is, right? But this is with the handoff, right? This is appreciation with an expectation at the same time.
Yeah. And she's like, okay.
Yeah.
Hear me, right? Like that.
He took me shopping. I'm like, this is like the Red Lobster Beyonce moment.
I love it's like it have to remember she's only 19. Okay, all right.
Now when she older, we got to look at that one, because it's a cycle, right? And it's familiar, and I think that's what happens when she gets older. Is like remember, we wanted him, not like I want him now.
Right. Yeah.
So y'all got to grab a copy. This is not
Please grab a copy. I would love to talk to you about it.
Look, and DM her. We're gonna link your social media, but how do you prefer for people to find you?
You can do Instagram. That's at Tahira99, I think it is now. And I have a Facebook page. I don't get on X much anymore, but there is something there, because I guess I need to have that presence. But yeah, Instagram and Facebook are just fine.
Okay, y'all, you definitely have to grab a copy and reach out to her, because she's open to talking about the book. So
I am like, get us a group together.
Yes,
I'm saying, get us a group together so we could talk it out.
Yes, I'm going to post it on our Goodreads, because I'm in a couple of groups on Goodreads, and I'm posting it in there. Yeah, they already picked their book for April, but I'm like, I'm about to get them to pick this book for next month.
Okay, right. I'll keep time for summer too.
Yeah, look for that summer fling. If people are looking for, look, but be wise, and check with your mama first.
Right.
I won't say anything else, but make sure your mama not in the same mode as you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I have one final question for you.
Okay.
When did you know that you were living your life freely? Was there a moment, or was there an experience that told you, like, I need to live freely, I need to be who I am?
Yeah, not to drop it on a somber note, but in that PhD process, there were a lot of moments that I didn't want to be here anymore. I wanted to end it, and then I had to take account, like, you wanted a PhD, this is what this means. You could just quit the program, not just quit life in general. And I had to talk to God, talk to myself, and say, well, let's live how we want to live. Don't forget everybody's expectation. We're going to do what we want to do, and we're going to stay here and enjoy life. And that's what I had to do. So that was approximately, I'll say 2014, 2015, when I made that decision. And yeah, now every day I can't even imagine feeling that way. But I remember when it was something that came up more than once for me that I had to address and say, I need to do whatever I want to do in order to stay here on earth with everybody else. So there's light on the other side. Yeah, for anybody going through that right now, stay with us. We're going to do what we want to do, and we're going to enjoy this. There's so much to enjoy. Let's get it.
See, you're about to make me scream. That is it. You do. And I share that same experience, because it's something about higher education. Like, I think my final word before I finished my graduate program was, I thought this was a space where you came to learn. And that's not what this is. That's not what this is. This isn't about learning. This is about performing. And if y'all wanted us to perform, you should have told us that at the beginning,
Hey, say it at the door. I know know how to out.
Listen, I would have been like Roshan with my moves, okay?
Yes.
As a party girl, I would have been the party girl.
That's what I said.
Ready to cut a rug, but no, it's not the same. So I echo that encouragement and that testimony to other people who might be going through something similar, or just in their life that's completely different when you get that feeling of like, this is not what I want to do, who I want to be. Just keep going, because you can create and recreate and create again and again whoever you want to be. And that's what we see throughout your storytelling. But I'm blessed to hear that's also what we see in your life story.
Yes. Yes. Amen. So good to talk to you.
I know.
Listen to this more. I gotta fly out there.
Listen, I don't play with me. It was very good. So I can tell everybody to get this book.
Okay.
But thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you.
The podcast is blessed to have you. It's
I'm
been
blessed
a joy. So take care, y'all.
Take care.
Like, comment, subscribe, share it with a friend. All the things. Y'all know how it go. If you're in your inbox, honey, reply to the email that I sent, and it'll come directly to me, and I'll shoot you an email back and tell you, hey girl, hey, okay? If you're listening via Apple Podcast, head to Instagram with a screenshot of the episode and tag me at SMX Coaching to tell me your answer. I want to know. See you again next week for another episode. Until then, take care.
I want a big life. I want to experience everything. I want to break every single rule there is. They say ambition is an unattractive trait in a woman. Maybe. But you know what's really unattractive? Waiting around for something to happen. Staring out a window thinking the life you should be living is out there somewhere, but not being willing to open the door and go get it, even if someone tells you you can't. Being a coward is only cute in The Wizard of Oz.
Grab the must-read novel, This Is Not How It Was Supposed to Go. Author Tahira Chloe Mahdi put her foot in her whole psychology PhD into a juicy drama about daughters, mothers, sexual freedom, community love, and the wildest summer ever. This Is Not How It Was Supposed to Go, in bookstores now.